Hello and welcome to In the Envelope, an awards podcast. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage. I'm here to give you a front row seat to the industry's most exciting awards races. Who is in the running? What makes awards-worthy film and television? How can you, listener, win a statue of your own? We're sitting down with actors to get that insider's perspective on these questions and more, and maybe, just maybe, we'll get a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
You've got to develop a very thick skin, but the passion is what picks you up. If you don't have the drive, then the rejection will destroy you. You've just got to want to do it. And it can happen early or it can happen later.
That was Gary Oldman.
It was.
I'm going to assume we just played a Gary Oldman clip from that interview.
There's lots of things I could take out of that.
Yeah.
We are post-interview right now, and we've just witnessed, well, you were part of it, but I witnessed it.
I was,
a really fascinating interview.
Yeah, you wrote down some choice quotes.
Oh,
you
let
have
me get
here.
the tab open. Yep, I've got some great quotes here.
He did some very backstagey kind of catering directly to Backstage listeners, I think.
Yeah.
Which is always what we want.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there are going to be many interviews where he goes into Strasbourg and Meisner and Stella Adler and those kind of people.
We got into it.
And it was fascinating hearing about that.
Absolutely.
And his time at the RSC.
And the idea of which projects to say yes to and alternating between stage and screen. And he, as he keeps saying, it's all about the work. It's all about the passion. We've heard it before on this podcast. But, oh, my God, did he say he said some things that I've never thought about and never heard of. Like, all that stuff about accents is really exciting.
Yeah, and we got treated to a few as well.
Yes.
I was really, based on my job, I was, like, pretty interested in the accent side
of course.
Of things. But,
he's a master.
Yeah, that idea of, not just doing a caricature of an accent, not just reproducing the sound of an accent, but you're having to sort of understand the context of why that accent is the way it is. And you'll hear shortly, he talks about Southern Ireland and comparing that to Northern Ireland and the geographical influence of the actual sound of the voices.
Topography. Of course, every accent is geographical in the sense that that's just how people talk, but he's making a point. I mean, he's a practiced pianist. He's a musician too, so it comes from that. But I've never thought of the melody of an accent coming from the actual environment that a person grows up in.
And speaking of music, I don't want to, spoil it too much, but he was talking about Churchill on the keyboard.
Yes.
And
what?
That's just incredible. What? So I don't think we should elaborate too much.
Tools.
I just want to tease that because it's such an interesting
Well, Winston Churchill in Darkest Hour, his latest role, which he already has a Golden Globe for and probably will continue to win awards for, that proved to be the perfect opportunity to pick Gary Oldman's brain about his process because you got to pull out all the stops when you're playing someone like that. Yeah. And it's a huge task. I was almost pleased to hear that he hesitated in accepting it because he knows that it's a daunting thing to play someone who's that famous, that long in the public eye. And
you didn't mention it, but especially hot on the heels of The Crown.
That's right.
Season 1. That's
already an award-winning performance from this year, last year.
Yeah.
It's kind of on everyone's brain. We also didn't talk about the fact that that Darkest Hour and Dunkirk, the other kind of big World War II prestige movie of the year, they're talking about the exact same time frame in England. One is just about the behind the scenes, the Darkest Hour, and one is about what's happening at the war itself.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, there's a huge amount to unpack from this interview. So.
If you haven't seen Darkest Hour, go see it. However, I think this is one of those interviews where listeners will get a lot out of it having not seen the movie.
Yeah, pre or post, absolutely.
Yeah,
I completely agree.
Cool. Well, should we get to it?
I think so.
Gary Oldman. Wow, he's been in so many things. Okay, we're going to have to do a good intro for him now. Here we go. Gary Oldman is a BAFTA, Emmy, and Academy Award-nominated actor, best known for his astonishing on-screen versatility. You may or may not recognize him in everything from the Harry Potter and Dark Knight film franchises to his various villainous turns in Léon the Professional, The Fifth Element, or Bram Stoker's Dracula. Focus Features' Darkest Hour, the World War II drama from director Joe Wright, features his award-winning performance as Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Here it is, the In the Envelope interview with Gary Oldman.
We have been going since late August.
Mm-hmm.
And it's longer than the movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you know that signing up for this movie? Did you assume?
No.
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 What did you know going into this movie?
It's the last thing you think about.
Uh-huh. You thought about the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. You thought about building Winston Churchill up from... I mean, he's been portrayed so many times, and there's footage of him everywhere. His words are imprinted on our brains. Like, how was this a daunting task for you?
Well, he's the most famous Briton.
Mm-hmm.
And he has his detractors, but he is revered and mythologized.
Mm.
There's statues everywhere of him in marble and bronze. And he has been played over the years by many, many, many great actors.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little... It wasn't an easy yes.
Ah, mm-hmm. But I assume for someone like you, who I think of you as someone who takes one role and then in the next role it's a left turn into something completely different.
You know, that really is one's at the mercy of the industry.
Ah.
And it really is what comes in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really engineer it, you know.
Sure.
You're not being offered every role.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's down to the imagination of the people that are casting you in the first place. I think how they see you, how they think of you.
How much of that is, how do you say yes? What do you know to say yes to? What do you know to say no to?
Well, I said no to Churchill for a year.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And why was that?
Well, the physicality of it was obviously going to be a challenge.
Yep.
And that, I think, in my mind, was the biggest roadblock.
Uh-huh.
That how do we achieve it? Now, I had worked with, very, very briefly, 20 years ago, I'd met Kazuhiro Tsuji, who was the man who designed the makeup. Mm. And when I sat down with Joe Wright,
mm-hmm.
My yes to playing Churchill was not, it wasn't completely contingent on getting Kazu.
Ah.
But I said to Joe, there's only one guy who... there's only one guy I can think of that could even remotely pull this off.
Right.
And he isn't working in the industry anymore. So he is now a sort of hyper-realist sculptor.
Oh, cool. Oh, wow.
And he does these huge... his work is a little like Ron Muick. If you know, he does miniatures and life-size people, but it's hyper-realistic. Wow. And Kazu does these portraits, these huge... heads and shoulders. Cool. They're like busts, but 10 times the size. So he's retired and still lives in California, but had just got out of the movie industry. So it was a case of really me
convincing him.
Yeah. But even then, you're not completely sure how it would work out. I mean, even he said, "This is challenging.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can."
Wow.
Can pull this off. So it was...
and if you don't get the makeup right for this role, it kind of falls apart.
Yeah. I mean, my initial hesitation was, look, you can't have someone walking around up there who looks like a man in a rubber face.
Right.
That's not going to work.
It's actually really great to hear that that it's a real challenge. I don't think of you as an actor who shies away from challenges, but you must know that this is a huge role to take on, and that is daunting, right?
Yeah. You put those fears aside. I saw Albert Finney, and I remember Robert Hardy, who was a very famous Churchill, an actor who played him. I think Hardy played him something like 24 times.
Oh, wow.
In his career. He was the sort of go-to guy and he was friends with the great biographer Martin Gilbert, and there was a television series about Churchill called The Wilderness Years, and I remember watching that, but I didn't revisit any of the other Churchills because you just need to tune out the noise of
yes.
There's a fear that you may get influenced or contaminated by other people.
Right.
So that was my first, the first thing I did was just sort of push all that aside.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the, obviously around the reading of Churchill, and there is gobs of it. There's something like 800 books on the man.
Of course.
50 books that he had written himself.
Oh, wow.
It's estimated that he wrote more words than William Shakespeare and Charles Dickens put together. Wow. He wrote millions and millions of words in his time. Funny enough, I'm reading something at the moment, rereading a book that was it was first published in 1936, and it's articles and essays that Churchill wrote warning of Hitler.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
He had been banging that drum since 1932.
Which is why he was the logical pick for...
I think so. And he went on to say, these wars they're given names. And he was asked, what would you say about the Second World War? And he said it's the unnecessary war. And he believed that an alliance,
early,
the League of Nations, could have actually outed Hitler
in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Wow.
So apart from his daily domestic business as a Prime Minister, and his many, many writings, and of course the speeches that he wrote throughout the war, there are millions and millions and millions of words. And so if you're going to research, you've got
to start somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, an endless supply of inspiration and information.
Almost too much inspiration.
Yeah. But I singled out a few important, some of the key reading material, and then went to the footage of Winston in the around this time, and was struck by how dynamic he was and how energized he was. He was 65 at the time, but marched around like someone half his age.
Yeah. Despite his kind of horrific eating and drinking habits and smoking and all of that.
Yeah, well, maybe not so bad. He lived to 90.
Yeah. He was doing something right.
He must have. We were all eating like that, though. I mean, I was born in 1958, and it's a whole different cultural
British cuisine. Yeah.
It was smoking was almost compulsory.
Yeah.
It's you smoke and you drank and you ate stodgy puddings, and that was the world at that time. I think that some of the portrayals are the way that Churchill has been represented, and some of it has been in older life. that you have this sort of idea of a sort of curmudgeon, grumpy man born in a bad mood, barking at everybody and shuffling around. And the Winston that I discovered was far more dynamic and
wonderful,
cherubic.
Cherubic, yes, that was in your performance too. Yeah. I've heard actors say when they're playing a very well-known person that they do kind of set aside any other recent portrayals, any other examples of actors interpreting it.
Yeah.
And I mean, would you say then that process is as if you're creating a character from scratch? Is it similar to creating a completely fictitious character from the ground up?
It depends on the writing.
Of the screenplay. Yeah.
Great writing will give you the clues.
Oh, cool.
A writer, a really good writer, it's like a sort of, I call it like your map of the world. And there'll be signposts and clues
for the character
to a character.
Cool.
Because it's almost like with Winston, you start with an impersonation and you move away from it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I think that's how I did it. That you make it. You kind of have to make it a creation and own it and make it your own thing.
And a lot of that is the footage, is watching.
Yeah, to get
visuals.
The sort of just little gestures and little things that he did. There's a little move that he did with his head and the way his, he seemed to always have the cigar on the left side of his mouth. A little thing he did with the way he said certain words and what he did with his lip. And he had a sort of speech impediment that he had been trying to sort of eradicate from when he was young. And then I think that it became... he was a great self-promoter and understood branding, I think, before it was a thing.
Oh, cool.
So that idea of, the sort of rather strange Victorian clothes, the Homburg hat, the cigar, the walking cane.
He wanted to be memorable.
He knew image. He understood image. And I think that the lisp, the speech thing that he had, he just eventually embraced it, and it became a trademark. It was unmistakable if you heard him on the radio,
which is part of the branding too, almost.
Yeah, you knew that it was Churchill. So I started heavy with that.
Almost.
And then you sort of you ease off the gas and find maybe sentences or places where you could hammer it a little heavier.
Right. And
otherwise you would have all the essays of Churchill, nearly all his essays were like this. So you would have 2 hours of summer talking like, and you couldn't, you're telling a story. It's not a documentary. You don't have the luxury of long-form TV, so you can't just spend an hour here and an hour there and
letting your audience get to know.
You're still doesn't matter who you are, if you're Steven Spielberg, Paul Thomas Anderson, or Joe Wright, you are pretty much still under the hammer of 2 hours and a few minutes.
Right.
And I just felt that lisp for 2 hours would be hard on the ear,
just alienating, for an audience.
And then it becomes, and then we have a film with it's sort of the Ministry of Funny Voices, because you've got that rather plummy voice of Halifax, played by Stephen Delane, who is, and he has a weak R. So he tends to say the R as a W. And then you've got me lisping my way and all these. And then you have Clemmy speaking in this very sort of sort of English voice. So it would, it could be just a carnival of voices.
Yeah, Monty Python.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it helps too that you're not doing a traditional biopic, quote unquote, where it's cradle to grave. You have to play him for his whole entire life. Instead, as you say, it's these couple weeks. He's 65 years old. He's at exactly this point in time.
Yeah.
That's a sizable chunk that you can.
Yeah, and that was part
on.
of when I finally got my head around saying yes to it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there were things that were there that were attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from obviously having the opportunity of speaking this great language and being able to speak some of those great words, but
absolutely.
I did not have to play a whole life. It really takes place over 5 or 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You said recently that you act. I want to ask why you act. And you joked, I don't know how serious you were when you said that it's from a place of self-loathing where you want to immerse into these characters. Yeah. I don't know how serious you are about that.
Well, it's a strange thing to want to do, I think.
Acting.
But it is about getting away from yourself.
Yeah.
One is just because one is in the public eye, so to speak, and on a big screen, still doesn't remove the fact that I'm a regular. I'm still a guy who has insecurities like everybody else, and the further that I can get away from them, and I guess disguise myself, there's a liberation that comes with it. It's like if anyone has worn a Halloween mask, you are suddenly liberated. You're less inhibited, and it's much like that feeling.
Yeah. Would you say it's therapeutic?
No.
Well, and you've played a lot of villains, so it's probably not great to immerse yourself into, I don't know, Lee Harvey Oswald and then go home and try to get back to, because each character has to sit with you, inside you.
Yeah, I mean, I've likened it to. Here's the thing: you are emoting, or asked to emote for a living. You're not doing it constantly in a role from the beginning to the end. But there are peaks, there are valleys, there. And if you are asked to weep or cry, or that's Gary crying, and you're then putting it through the facility that you have or whatever, but you're channeling it through your prism, your particular thing, or your technique, your skill, or whatever, whatever you want to call it. So you are pretending, you're play acting, you're pretending to be another person. But I use things in my own experience and my own history to achieve those emotional outbursts. So there are days, or there have been roles that one plays where you go in and it's like a snow globe. You're shaking yourself up and revisiting things. Yeah. And then what? You're expected to sort of just go home and, I don't know, drink a beer, put your feet up and watch TV. Right. It's a strange. Yeah. You're not schizophrenic. Right. You can't become someone else, because you would be in an institution, but you give the illusion of that. I read Stanislavski and a little bit of Uta Hagen, particularly the writings and teachings of Stella Adler over the years.
Yeah.
But there's a Meisner acting teacher, Meisner quote, that says that acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And that to me hits the nail on the head.
That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. That's a wonderful way. He just encapsulates the whole thing there in that one.
And so you, of course, you're like any actor, like any studied actor, you're drawing from all of these influences. Meisner is also so much about listening to your scene partner or to outward circumstances. So when you say, when you have to emote a lot or weep or some such, that comes from you and your own imagination, how often are you also tuning into your scene partner?
Oh, yes. I mean, the moment that Lily James and I have when she in the movie when she talks about her brother and her eyes start to well up and then she turns to me and she says, "What is it?" And I say, "I'm just looking at you." And there's this sort of this wonderful sort of emotional connection between us. I'm taking from what Lily is giving me there,
and giving right back.
Yeah. There are there are moments that you have to go to where you're asked to sort of emote from like 0 to 60.
Yes.
And you're not necessarily reacting or playing off another character. So that's when that's when you dig deep.
Yeah, the bag of tricks almost.
Yeah, and you go to, you try and find or think of something that then brings. It's good old fashioned emotional recall.
Yeah. Wow. Is Stella Adler? She's focused on imagination. Is that right?
Yeah.
And who pioneered sense memory? Is that also a?
I think that might be that's Lee Strasberg.
Strasberg. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. And you draw from all of these.
Yeah, I think instinctively.
Yeah. That's what training is. It's a baseline.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is intuition.
Yeah, you got to build that intuition.
You can hone it.
Right.
But you can't teach it.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah, if someone has, like someone will have a funny bone. You just don't know why that person just intuitively has a comic timing.
Right.
It's even the cadence, a turn of phrase. They just have this comic leaning. There's something about them that just makes you laugh, or charm.
Yes.
You
something
have to
as simple
have.
As
it has to be innate.
Yeah.
You can't. It's hard to act charm.
Yeah. Yes. It's not an emotion to play. It's not. Comes from you.
It's like a metaphysical reaction that you have to a person.
Yeah, you can't invent charisma or copy it. It has to kind of come from you.
Yeah, so there's things that you can. There are techniques and things that you can learn as an actor, and if you have good instinct, you can sharpen instinct by really working.
Just working hard.
And even just working on your own. There's no substitute for the work. When I knew that you just apply common sense. I knew, for instance, that you can't search for the words in Darkest Hour. They've got to be readily accessible. And there was no way that I could go through a makeup process and B, learning or looking at the script or looking at the scene. So I learned Darkest Hour once the final once we'd really locked in the final shooting script. I learned it like a play.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we it was unusual. We had 4 weeks rehearsal.
Oh wow.
And so you could really physicalize and vocalize the role.
Yeah.
But I was off the book.
Totally.
By the time I got to
backwards and forwards.
Yeah, by the time we got to rehearsal, I knew it. I knew the script like a play.
Yeah.
And then you're not really. I'm a big believer. It's not how well you know something; it's how long you've known it.
Oh, interesting. You want to have it ingrained in you for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, someone once said that years and years after you were in Hamlet, that you could quote any passage of Hamlet at a given notice.
Someone said that about me?
Yeah.
Or,
I'm tempted to just ask you to just do a soliloquy right now.
Yeah, but there are things that, once more to the breach, dear friends, once more I'll close up this wall with our English dead in peace. There's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility, but when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger, stiffen the sinews, summon up. You've known something a long time, and then it is readily accessible.
When did you last play that role?
That was actually, I just quote a bit of Henry V. I'm happy that someone said I played Hamlet.
Yes.
I've never played Hamlet, but I'll take that.
I believe it was on the set of Fifth Element that someone said, "Oh yeah, he just can quote any passage from that play."
I think I know where it may have come from. I have a poem that a sort of comical. A poem about Hamlet that I sometimes
that you wrote.
No, it was by a man called Gerald Wiley, and I sometimes quote it for fun for people. I think that's probably where that
rumor came from.
Yeah.
I would like to ask too, because you're a master, I don't know what to call it, dialect practitioner. All of that. The Meisner and the Strasbourg and the Adler and all of this, and Stanislav, of course, how does that come into the astonishing variety of accents that you've played on screen? How can another actor become that good at it?
Oh, well, there are many out there. I think that it's a good ear. It again. I think you have to have some talent for it.
Something innate.
Yeah. And then it's work again.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. For Darkest Hour, there are times when Churchill, he's in a lower register. And I hooked up with this singing teacher. Well, he's an opera singer, but he teaches. Primarily he teaches, but he also is a sort of opera singer in his own right, Michael E. Dean, and I found him, and I always got a music to do sort of vocal work, and we together worked out the range of Churchill on the piano, on the keyboard, and then over time I could lower my voice to hit the notes, to be more in the range of Winston. And that, again, is a muscle.
Yeah.
Some people are born with an incredible set of pipes. I mean, they just naturally have a wonderful speaking voice or a great singing voice. I'm more of a tenor, so...
Churchill's more of a bass, I guess.
Baritone. Yeah, he's in, and then, of course, after a long evening of cigars and that will also give you...
The range goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to achieve some of that raspiness, it's just exercising a muscle. It's like going into training.
But also playing it out on a piano and giving your character certain ranges That's remarkable. It's another way. It's another filter. Almost, you're talking about that prism of the character.
Yeah.
That's another prism.
Yeah. And you look at, environments. Accents are. There's a reason for accents. If you look at something obvious, if you look at Southern Ireland, which is open and hilly and green, and there's almost the melody of the hills in the way that they speak, versus a very cold, grey, urban
London,
Belfast.
Sure, or Belfast.
So they don't open their mouth as much.
They're not as free. They're more contained.
and it's the same. We're here in New York. You've still got the old sound of Italian in Italian New York, and it tends to go down. So you have, the accent will go down. What's the matter with you? It's sort of in that area. If you think of Irish New York, you still have the sound of Ireland in the thing, because it tends to go up at the end, and it tends to be a lot lighter. Come on, So you go, hey, forget about it. And then you go, forget about it. So one goes down and one goes up.
Oh, wow.
So it's where people, it's their environment. If it's flat and open and windy and cold, then the face becomes more pinched, and the mouth, it isn't. So accents, it dictates how.
Remarkable. I've never thought of such a thing.
Well, it all has. I think it probably all has. If you think of the South and how hot it is, and you had plantation owners who, they weren't picking the cotton. They were sitting in the heat on the porch. You know what I mean?
Everything becomes languid.
And everything becomes sort of,
right.
It feels sweaty and hot and kind of lazy, the way the sound. So I always, it's you want to make it as specific as you can.
That's good advice too. Yes.
Yeah.
You don't want to do the Southern accent.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than sort of just a general thing.
Yeah.
One of the hardest challenges I ever had as an actor was doing Jim Gordon in The Batman, because Chris Nolan didn't want me to come from a particular place.
Right, fictional Gotham is.
So he didn't want it to sound Chicago. He didn't want it to sound New York. He didn't.
And you're not British.
And I'm not British.
Right.
So.
You're somewhere fictitious in America.
Yeah. Somewhere in America.
Interesting.
I found that.
You have nothing to ground.
No.
Yeah.
And there's also there's music in language.
Yeah.
And you find, a lot of British actors, seem to be quite comfortable with a Southern accent, and I think that's partly to do with because there's kind of a music to it, and you can come in and out and the thing, and it's got a kind of. There's actually something you can latch on to. In a film like The Contender, it's. There's hard R's, but it was a very sort of, again, there wasn't the music there. There wasn't a melody there that you can grab onto. So some of them are more challenging than others.
Sure. And like you said about Churchill, sometimes you got to know when to kind of ease back and not push it.
Because you're trying to communicate.
Right, the words.
A story, and you've got to service you've got to be at service to the tale that you're telling, and so you sometimes forsake the absolute accuracy of it, only because you want to get the point across.
Right,
I just don't want it to be a mouthful of splashy ashes.
Right. Yes. Patrick Stewart actually said the same thing. He said, I don't need to be loud. You just need to be clear. You have to be articulate enough that we can understand you.
Yeah. See, there's someone
whose voice
I watched. I was lucky to have seen a great many of his performances in the 70s at the Royal Shakespeare Company. I mean, and there's someone who's just got born with a voice.
Absolutely. Yeah, and he's actually from the north, and his accent has changed so much that you can't tell that's where he's from. I mean, he's that much of a chameleon almost. Did you guys overlap at the RSC when you were there?
No, he had long gone.
Mm-hmm. But your time there, it was well into your career by that point, but it must have been just before the kind of Hollywood era of your career.
Yeah, I guess what I always tried to do, or at least the way it happened, is I would do a film and then a play and then a film and a play.
Cool.
And that's how initially I kind of navigated it. When I was doing Prick Up Your Ears with Stephen Frears, I had 5 plays in rep that I was doing.
Oh, wow.
And at 5 o'clock we would finish, and the car would then take me to the Barbican.
Oh,
and
wow!
And then I would do a show. We'd do a show.
One of 5 shows.
Yeah, and then we would do that and rotate them, in rep.
Oh, how strange! And you're playing a playwright in Prick Up Your Ears.
Yeah, and getting up very early to get. I don't know how I did it.
No, that's remarkable.
I couldn't. I mean, Churchill was a test of stamina.
Sure.
You'd come in. I mean, my alarm would sometimes, my pickup times were sometimes 2:30 a.m., 2:45 a.m.
Oh gosh.
I'd get in 4 hours of makeup and clothes and the whole thing. Then a 12-hour day, because you've already worked 4 hours in the makeup chair.
Yeah.
And then you've got 10 or 12 hours, an hour to take it off at night. By the time that you would travel, I mean, they're good problems to have. I'm not. But by the time that you would, sort of decompress and have dinner and a shower, so you're looking at a sort of 18, 19-hour day. And the thing that I was initially worried about was just the sheer stamina. Of being able to really just day in, day out keep the energy. But how I was in a film and in a theatre in the evening, honestly, it's youth, isn't it?
That's stamina, right? That's youth.
It's just being. I didn't even think about it. It was just.
Wow.
Yeah, where you going tonight? Got to get. Got to get off to the theatre. I've got a show tonight. And the hard thing was because it was in rep. And it was in this rotation, you would get there, and then of course you would then be performing a play that you haven't done for 3 weeks.
Oh my God, yeah.
And so we would meet in the green room and do a speed run of lines.
Oh wow.
And then you're on. And some of those shows that were back in after a 2-week absence or 3 weeks, I actually thought were terrible.
Oh, you just can't fully click into it.
No. It felt like they felt like a sort of like a dress rehearsal or something. You know what I mean? You're trying to remember exits and entrances.
It's like you said about you can't be at a loss for what your words are. You have to have that so in your blood and your muscles. Yeah.
But we got through it.
Yeah. Because we're backstage, we always love asking the acting advice, even audition advice questions. I know you were rejected from Rawtt.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they regret rejecting you, for one thing. But for those actors who are at that stage where they want to go to acting school, or they're being rejected from any acting opportunities, and that extends to just the sheer amount of auditions you go to where you get a no, What advice do you have for those people in that position?
Well, it's a tough one because I always refer to it as a sort of the theatre disease, you know. I test positive. I have the theatre illness.
Yeah, the bug, yeah.
You got the bug.
Yeah.
And you, I was rejected.
Yeah.
Rawaan was my first audition because it was my first choice, and many of my sort of acting heroes had been through it, the training there. And in the end of the day, I realised now I realise it's all much of a muchness. You take the good, discard the bad, do the work, and at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. But at the time when I was 18 or 16 or whatever, that was the sort of holy grail of acting schools, and I did not get in, but it didn't dishearten me. You just sort of dust yourself off because you really want to do it. You got to really want to do it.
Yes.
And it's everything, like when you're young, you get a passion for something, then it becomes, you put it above everything else. It's before everything else. When my kids were at school, there was a young kid there, and he used to sort of noodle around on the guitar, and he has since become a really very good songwriter. And they have this band called Kid Bloom in LA, and they just get better and better and better and better. And I sent a tape of theirs to Jack White, and they since found a label and an agent and a manager and all of that stuff. But at the time, they were relatively unknown, and I directed a little music video for them, and I just believed in them because I just thought they were talented. And I said to Jack, just have a listen. And he wrote back and he said, they are way ahead of most of the demos that I hear, just for a start. And he also said, what would my advice be? You got to want it like it's your life's blood, like your life depends on it. And you just got to keep writing music, playing, and working at it. And it may break, it may happen for them, it may not. But you've got to want to you've got to put in the work. Eric Clapton's the same thing, when other people in his early, of course he later had his moments with alcohol and the drug abuse, but in the beginning, when other people were kind of like messing around and up the pub and drinking and taking drugs, Eric would wake up and practice until he went to sleep. There's no substitute for the work. And if you love it and it's a passion, then it isn't arduous. It's good work. It's not bad work. It's good work.
Right.
I was the first person in my drama school to get a job in the professional theatre. And it wasn't, I don't say that it was because I had, exceptional talent or better than some of the people in the year. I wrote the letters, had my headshots done. I, finished my degree, working on my voice. I was doing those things while other people were messing around and going to the pub every night.
Mm-hmm. Don't go to the pub every night. It's a good piece of advice.
Don't go to the pub. And that meant that I had my headshots done, had my letters written.
All the professional actor.
Sent it out.
101, yeah.
Got responses back, auditioned, failed at a few places, didn't get in at the Bristol Old Vic or wherever and then eventually I auditioned and got my equity card. I just did the work.
Yeah, that's what it all comes down to. And when those rejections come in and they are inevitable, then you, as you say, you dust yourself off.
Yeah, you've got to develop a very thick skin, but the passion is what picks you up.
Right.
If you don't have the drive, then the rejection will
defeat you.
It'll destroy you. If you've got to have, and you've got to have. I mean, it was Churchill who said, of course I'm an egoist. He said, if you don't have an ego, you would never get on in life. You would never achieve anything. I mean, there's got to be something in us that needs the attention or the likes being noticed. I mean, whatever that thing is. But you've got to. You just got to want to do it. And it can happen. And it can happen early or it can happen later. A young actor came up to me the other day and he was worried that, he's 28 years old, but he sees actors who are 18 or 17 and they've got a break and he started a little later in the training as an actor, and my advice to him was just worry about what you're doing.
Yeah, rather than
it doesn't matter. I've watched Anthony Hopkins all my life. I've seen him on stage. I've seen him in films, and I've seen him in television. And he's been brilliant. Gets an Oscar at 53 years old.
Yeah.
You never know.
You never know, exactly.
So, I said to this young guy, and 28 is still a baby. He's still young. It's don't measure yourself against that. They got a break at 18. They might not be around in 5 years. Sure. You know what I mean? Or you can't measure yourself.
You can't think about other people's passion or work.
Yeah.
It's about your own.
Yeah. So that would be my advice.
It's excellent. Excellent advice. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah.
It's been an honor to have you. It's worth noting, not to his face, because it's just like blowing, it's just like, I'd just be like praising him unnecessarily and like whatever. But he is one of those actors where there's this phenomenon where everyone who works with him, they then say, oh, he's my favorite actor. They then say like, oh, he's my example of the very best person I've worked with. Like Benedict Cumberbatch, Daniel Radcliffe, the list is length, Colin Firth, like everyone, those are all like the Brits. He's worked with all of the Brits and they've all named him their favorite actor. Yeah,
and that's very telling.
It is very exactly. And my theory, again, I didn't tell him this, but my theory about Gary Oldman is that he's so good, but the reason he wasn't never nominated for a Golden Globe Award before this year was because, yes, he's good individually in everything he does, but you don't recognize him from one role to the next.
Right.
And it's almost like you can't compare someone who plays Sid Vicious and Joe Orton in the same year. I believe those were like within a year of each other. Each is individually great, but it's because you see one and you see the other, and you have to then make the mental leap of, oh, that one actor played both of those.
Absolutely.
That's what makes him amazing.
This may be ridiculous, but as you were speaking there, I was thinking that I wonder if he amplifies everyone else's performance to such a degree that in some ways, they don't outshine him, but because they're elevated in their performance, they're seen as this, well, this is a real, like, important performance for them or whatever. Just his presence, because
he's upping the stakes.
I wonder if that's why people enjoy working with him so much, because he's so great to work with.
He's just giving and giving and giving.
Yeah.
And he touched on that a little bit with that scene with Lily James in Darkest Hour, where the two of them are feeding off of each other. I loved hearing about how some of that has to be innate and it has to come from you.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need a sense memory to really emote as an actor. But a lot of other times it's about receiving and giving back and just being really present with your scene partner. Extraordinary. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe for more interviews from the front lines of the industry's awards races. In the Envelope is recorded at Lotus Productions and Hyperbolic Audio in New York City. Thanks as always to producer, editor, and all-around podcast whiz, Jamie Muffett. You can follow him on Twitter at JamieMusicNYC. You can follow me, Jack Smart, on Twitter at JackSmartWrites. Thank you, of course, to the team at Backstage, the most trusted name in casting. That's Peter Rappaport, Mark Stinson, Francis Ramos, Rawaan Alkhatib, and especially the astounding Kasey Howe. For more awards and industry coverage, head over to Backstage.com. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time for another glimpse in the Envelope.